guys? It's great to see everyone tonight. Hope you all are having a good day. Hope you had a good weekend. Let's get to it. So last week, guys, our focus was on guard retention. We were working on how to defend our guard using frames, understanding how to defend the position from in the open guard, the closed guard, also the recumbent guard as well, and of course the seated position as well. So we've worked on a lot of guard retention, guard defense, which is obviously, like we mentioned last week, your top priority as a white belt. The number one thing that you guys need to focus on is how to defend your guard. However, you don't win in Jiu Jitsu by defending, you win by attacking. So we need to understand how to use our defenses to facilitate our attacks. So what we're going to work on this week, and actually for the next few weeks, will be guard attacks. So tonight, we're going to be focusing on a sweep. Then on Thursday, we're going to be working on a choke from the closed guard as well. Now, tonight, we're going to be focusing on a very basic closed guard sweep known as the hip bump sweep. Before I demonstrate this, I want to talk about our main sweeping concept, and I challenge you when you watch the sweep to see if you can see where that concept is within the technique. So our main sweeping concept in Jiu Jitsu is that we're going to look to access a lever on our opponent's body to shift their center of gravity and then get their hips to the mat. So be on the lookout. Let's see if we can find where we're controlling the lever. Let's see how we shift their center of gravity, and then finally, let's see how we get to the top position. So I'm going to demonstrate this slowly, and then we'll get right to it, all right, guys? So I'm going to face my coach here, my partner. I'm going to start by pulling closed guard. Let's check it out. And now from this position, I'm going to utilize my hip bump sweep to get to the top position. All right, guys, here we go. And now that I'm in the top position, I have swept my opponent. So this is what we mean when we say a sweep. That's where I use my guard to make my partner fall over so I can get on top. Now, in this particular situation, I was able to get to the mount, which is the most dominant top position. So that transition right there is very, very powerful. So let's take a look at the actual mechanics of the hip bump sweep. Now, before we do that, I'd just like to touch on how we're going to pull guard, just like we worked on last week if you were not with us. So we're starting in a good grappling stance. My body is bent, my legs are staggered, my hands are the first thing he's going to meet. We're going to go head to head with double collar grips here. I'm going to start stepping my foot to frame on his hip as I pull him down with me, utilizing that double collar grip to really get a big rowing motion. I'm going to use my legs to close the guard as I pull him in. So now that I'm here in the closed guard, I have a lot of control. I can use this control to start to set up various attacks. We're going to do our hip bump sweep. Now, we're going to look at this in two different ways tonight. We're going to look at it first against a very compliant day one jiu-jitsu person who has no idea what they're doing. It's going to be easy to hit, okay? Then we're going to look at it against an opponent who actually knows what they're doing. Okay, guys? So again, I've pulled him into my closed guard here. For my hip bump sweep, I need to start to elevate my hips above his. So to do this, I'm going to start to get up on one of my elbows. You can do either elbow. I tend to use my left elbow as the elbow that I like to pop up on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to use my left elbow to roll and sit up onto my side. Notice how my back is no longer on the mat. Now, if you can do this while maintaining a closed guard, that's preferable. I don't want to open my guard unnecessarily, right? So I'm just basically doing a sit-up motion, so I shouldn't need to unlock my guard. If you feel like you're struggling at the sit-up in the beginning, you can go ahead and put your feet on the mat and then sit up. However, I really encourage you, try to do that sit-up without unlocking the guard. Now that I'm here, I'm up on my elbow, I'm going to start to, here it comes, access a lever on his body. So in Jiu Jitsu, everything's either a frame or a lever. I don't want him to use his arm as a frame to defend this sweep. Here's what I mean. If I bump Coach Seth over right now, he can stick his arm out and use it like a frame to support his center of gravity, so I can't shift him over. So what do I need to do? I'm going to change that frame into a lever by accessing it at the elbow. So I'm going to use my hand to cup his elbow here, so that way he cannot stick that hand out. Now that's not, believe it or not, the primary lever that we're accessing here. Believe it or not, the primary lever that we're going to access is his spine. His spine is the thing that I'm going to use to shift his center of gravity. I need to make him lean over so that his hips are forced to follow. So to do this, we're going to utilize a hip bump motion. My feet are now going to unlock and plant on the mat. So I'm framing against the floor. I'm going to bridge my hips and lift them up as high as I can, aiming to get my hips connected to his body. So I like to aim to get above his belt. That's a good kind of rule to try to aim for. So get my hips above his belt. Notice how I'm driving off my left elbow and I'm driving my hips through him. As I do this though, I'm maintaining lever control on his elbow. I'm simply using an overhook grip. And now as I bridge my hips, I'm gonna start to drive the two of us over to the side that I'm looking at. Why? Because that's the side that I've taken away one of his posts on. So as I lift my hips, I'm gonna drive, and that's gonna bump and flip him over. Now I can finish here in the mount. As soon as I get to the mount, let's maintain our position. So I wanna get my hands wide, my chest low, toes dead, and my feet sucked under his butt. So now from here, I'm in a very strong mount position, and if this is a competition, that would be a 6-point transition that just occurred, right? 2 points for the sweep, 4 points for the mount. If my math adds up, I believe that's 6. So that's really great. Now, we're again looking at this from the context of this is basically an opponent who has no idea what they're doing, right? They're making some critical errors that are going to make the sweep inevitable. We're next going to look at how we're going to do this against a skilled opponent. But let's look at this variation one more time. We're going to kind of warm up with this. I'll do it from a head-on view here. All right, guys, so I'm going to start in a good stance. I'm going to grip up and pull. Now, from here, I'm going to start to choose the side I like to get up on. I'll do the other side this time, so I'll get up on my right elbow. Remember, I'm basically just doing a crunch as I get up onto my elbow here. So if you have trouble with this, open your elbow out first and roll in towards that elbow, okay? If you have trouble with the actual sit-up motion. So as I come up here, my elbow is posting. This is gonna help me maintain my base here. He can't push me back down quite as easily now. From here, I'm gonna access his arm as a lever to hold it still so he can't post. My feet are gonna find the mat. Now from this position, as I bridge my hips, I'm gonna roll both of us over towards the windows and finish in the mount. My hands find the mat, and I stay low to the ground. I'd like to show one more detail from the rear. So I want you guys to pay special note to what my legs are gonna be doing right here. So I'll borrow Professor Jean real quick. So guys, take a look at what my legs are doing. This is very important. When I'm utilizing the hip bump sweep here, I can't let my feet go wide. Okay, so it's very awkward and uncomfortable, but I'm saying this because we see it a lot. If I have my feet like wide out like this, kind of like I'm bowing my knees, this is very dangerous. As I bump him into my knee, I'm gonna actually injure myself. So what I wanna do is I wanna keep everything tight. My feet are right next to his hips. My knees are pinched in nice and tight. I'm not dropping things open. I'm trying to take all the space available and crush it. So that now it's very, very hard for him to start to move away from the position. So again, if your feet are wide, it should feel wrong. It should feel kind of like you're pinching your knees. So slide your legs back in. And now from here, I bump, drive, and come up on top. Alrighty, guys. Does anybody have any questions on this hip bump sweep? Okay, take your time. Go nice and slow. Person who's being swept, just sit on your knees, good posture, hands on your partner, and then let them work the technique. All right, let's go ahead and pair up, find someone similar in size, and then we'll get to work. 1, 2. All right, guys. Before we move into the next piece, I'd like to take a moment to address some common issues that I was seeing, and I also want to field some questions if need be. So one of the common things that I was noticing was that we were not using our feet to generate base to drive our hips when we were actually performing the bump movement. Okay, so let's do it from the rear real quick here. So when I have the closed guard position, I sit up, everything's fine and dandy. When I'm here and I'm ready to bump, some of us were either keeping the guard closed or you were just opening the guard, but you weren't actually using your feet. Remember, I'm using my feet to push off the floor. I should be able to stand on my feet when I do this one. What we're doing is we're using the floor and our feet to generate the base to drive our hips over, okay? If I'm just relying on like a sudden twist of my hip, that's so easy for the top person to shut down. They're just gonna drive our hips back down to the floor. I wanna push off the mat so that way I'm generating really solid base, a good platform that I can use to apply force. So again, use your feet and drive. Keep the knees close, really push off hard. The other thing that I was noticing was that when we're using our elbow grip here, some of us are doing a couple of interesting options, and I just want to talk about some of the train of thought here with some of these options. Remember, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to restrict his ability to create a frame to post, okay? Going for the elbow is a very friendly, user-friendly grip here. You can also go for the wrist, that's fine. Wrist grips tend to be a little bit more intimidating, meaning if I'm grabbing at his wrist, he immediately knows that I'm trying to be offensive and do stuff to him, okay? Grabbing for the elbow is just a little bit more like innocuous. It's not that intimidating, right, for him to see. However, I'm not trying to like underhook his arm and do this, right? I'm not trying to arm drag him. I'm just hooking over top, so I'm doing an overhook. When I do this overhook, you can use your elbow to kind of bump him here, that's fine, or you can bring it over the top. Really doesn't make a huge difference right now. I just need to focus on controlling his elbow here. And I'm actively pulling. So I'm holding that elbow close to my body. So again, I have lever control. I don't want him to put the hand out to stop his fall. Once I perform the bump, make sure we come up in a good positional control. I don't want to come up and just get into the habit of doing this. See how tall I am? The taller the building, the less stable it is. Let's get low, chest over top of their head, hands nice and wide, okay? That way it's more difficult for them to start to push me around. Now, one question that was asked was, what's the viability of this? Is this really going to work? This doesn't seem like it's that effective. Yes and no. The way we just practiced it was the mechanical aspects. That's how you do a hip bump sweep. You're probably not going to be able to do that exact variation of a hip bump sweep against anyone who's been doing jiu-jitsu for more than a day, right? Because they should understand, hey, wait a minute, they're restricting my ability to move my arm. They're shifting my center of gravity. I have good alignment. I shouldn't let these things happen. I don't want them to break my alignment down. So then what do we need to do? We need to create a reaction out of our opponent that will get us to the hip bump sweep. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break our opponent's alignment before the hip bump sweep. When they regain their alignment, that's going to take us into our hip bump sweep position. Let me demonstrate what I'm referring to, and then we'll talk about the mechanics behind it. So I'll just start on the ground in a closed guard here. So again, I'm here. Right now, Coach Seth has perfect alignment. And in case you don't know, alignment is our body's ability to generate force. We split alignment into 3 different concepts: base, posture, and structure. Right now, his base is wide. It's hard for him to move from side to side. He has a good platform he's sitting on. His posture is rigid. His spine is nice and straight. He's not leaning forward. He's not leaning backwards. His structure is fixed. His elbows are in. He's framing against my body. The structure is the efficient positioning of his limbs. So right now, the scorecard is 3-3. We both have all of our alignment. There's no reason that I should be able to do a hip bump sweep to him right now. Because if I were to just try to sit up, all he needs to do is push my hips down. So if we just learned the hip bump sweep that we just did and then called it a day, unfortunately, that would never work. So we need to break his alignment first. I'm going to demonstrate the way we're going to do it, and then we'll talk about the mechanics. Here we go. So now I utilize the hip bump sweep, but I started by breaking his alignment. So let's look at how we're creating an alignment break here. I'm breaking his alignment in 2 ways. I'm breaking his posture, and I'm disrupting his structure. So to do this, I need to pull him down towards me. I want to break his posture. If I am way bigger and stronger than Coach Seth, I might be able to just get away with brute forcing my way with the collars. But what's the problem with that? We never want to have a strength battle in jiu-jitsu. If you're having a strength battle, you're not using technique. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pull on his collar with one hand, but my other hand is going to start to break the structure of this arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my palm to grab the back of his elbow. I'm simply using a C grip here. I want his elbow to touch the back of the top of my palm, just like this. Here. Now, I'm going to pull not only his collar towards me, I'm also going to pull his elbow out towards me. This, coupled with me tucking my knees in, and I'll show this in a profile in a moment, but these things coupled together will break his alignment very significantly. So look, I've broken his posture, he's leaning forward. I've broken the structure of this arm by bending it out, and I've widened his base to the point that it's very, very disrupted, and he now, the scorecard is 0-3. My hip bump sweep is now an option. When he starts to sit back up, because what? He doesn't want to be here, right? He knows that he's in danger. So what's he going to do? Boom, he wants to sit back up. So when he goes to sit back up, we are going to follow them and force them to overcompensate the movement. He wants to sit up, but he doesn't want to sit that far. I'm going to force him over with the hip bump sweep. So I'm taking the momentum of him fixing his alignment and using that to bump him over. Okay, guys, so let me show you this from a profile view here. Again, I'm in my closed guard position. I'm going to grab the collar, back of the elbow. Again, you can do either side. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to pull both of these points as I tuck my knees. Here. Top person, once your partner breaks you down like this, just go ahead and start to get yourself back up. Go slow in the beginning, so that way we have our window of opportunity. It's very noticeable, right? If you just do this and boom, pop back up, boom, really fast, you're closing that window of opportunity for them too quickly. Let's give them time to practice this. So look, I break him down. As he starts to come up, I'm gonna come up with him as I cover that elbow. Look, I'm in the exact same position that we were just doing. I'm posting with my elbow, and I'm collecting his elbow. Now, my feet find the mat, and I hip bump sweep to take him over. My hands are on the floor, nice wide base. So you see how he wants to go backwards, but I'm gonna take him a little bit extra. I'm gonna take him a little bit further than he intended to go, okay? This whole thing is very timing based, as are many things in Jiu Jitsu. My timing has to be spot on. As my opponent's sitting up, I'm riding their momentum to bump them over. Let me show an example of this whole thing in a full speed, so that way you guys can see what the whole thing should look like, okay? And now I find myself in the mount. So you notice I broke him down. As he was coming up, I rode up with him and then bumped him over. Okay, guys? Let me show this one more time without talking, and then we'll see if anyone has any questions. I'll do it from the front view again. Okay, here we go. And I finish in the mount. Common question, which side do I bump to? Honestly, it doesn't matter. I like to bump to the side that I'm already holding the elbow on because it just feels more natural for me to cover that elbow with both hands and then bump. But you can certainly do this to the other side. You'll just need to use the collar grip to post up with. Okay, so again, it really depends on which side you feel comfortable doing.
Another common question is, what if they don't sit up? That's great for you. If they don't sit up, you have a lot of submission options and a lot of sweeping options from there as well. But for now, we're gonna go with someone that has a good reaction. They do sit up. They do try to posture back up. But just keep that in mind. If they don't sit up, it's not the end of the world. You just may not know the answer to that yet. You will, but just not yet.
Alrighty, guys, any questions? Gabe? Try to plant your feet on the mat as best as you can. Try to get both. If you can't, just focus on one and just drive with that far side foot, if possible. Okay, good question. Any other questions? Okay, guys. So let's get to work working on the alignment break, going into the hip bump sweep. Let's go, 1, 2. Any questions? Looking good, guys. Just again, a couple notes that I was seeing, some common errors. First is gonna be hand placement when it comes to how we come up with them after the alignment break. Some of you are noticing that because you already have one hand on the elbow, is that enough to control the lever effectively to not allow him to post? Yes and no. If he sits up and I still have this elbow grip, go ahead and sit up, coach, I can technically still do the hip bump sweep because I have the lever control. But you may have noticed, it was a bit of a struggle for me to sit up there. Why? Because when my hand is fixed to his elbow, my elbow is fixed at one point. I don't want my elbow to be fixed. I want my elbow to be able to move. So after I break him down here, when he sits up, let go and then switch for this elbow grip. So now I can actually manipulate and move my elbow around more, okay? Again, when I'm holding onto his elbow here, it's to prevent him from posting. If I use the hip bump and he does post his hand out, it's not the end of the world. There's still other stuff we can do. We have the Kimura, the triangle, guillotines. There's still stuff we can do from here. So don't be afraid of if they post. If they post, it's not the end of the world. Just do your best to hold on to that. Again, the danger is if I'm holding on here with both hands, it can be difficult to get up onto my elbow effectively. So I like to, again, when I break him down, here, as he sits up, switch the grip. And then come up out of the hip bump sweep. This is an extremely timing-based movement, so you have to work at the timing of this. As your opponent builds their alignment back up, that's when you're following them. So you're almost thinking about this like you just knocked down their tower. They're going to try to rebuild their tower. When's the best time to attack your enemy? When they're trying to kind of recombobulate themselves and get themselves reoriented. That's when you should attack, right? Because their defenses are down. So if I break your defenses down, as you're trying to rebuild your defenses, that's when I should be going and attacking you. Does that make sense, guys? All right, so I want us to just take a few more minutes, touch this one up. Again, focus on the timing, break them down. As they come up, we go. And then we should be good to go for our specific training rounds. All right, guys, let's go. 1, 2.